The most revealing thing about Stringer Bell and Bunny Colvin is that they never formally start working together at all. There is no meeting, no handshake, no moment where they agree on a shared plan. Instead, their alignment emerges quietly, almost accidentally, through pressure, timing, and the logic of the street itself. The Wire refuses to give us a clean origin point because the point is that there isn't one. If you watch Season 3 closely, what you see is not a partnership declared, but a partnership formed in practice. Bunny creates Amsterdam to reclaim the corners for ordinary life. Stringer embraces it because it turns chaos into something closer to a system. Their motives are different, but for a brief stretch, their solutions overlap so precisely that they end up working together without ever needing to say so. To understand when that begins, you have to go back before Amsterdam exists. The groundwork starts in Season 2, when Stringer is basically running the Barksdale organization while Avon is in prison. At that point, Stringer has already started thinking about the drug trade differently. Avon still thinks in terms of reputation, territory, soldiers, and power. Stringer thinks in terms of supply, profit, waste, and risk. That does not mean Stringer is some genius CEO who accidentally got born into crime. The show never says that. In fact, it repeatedly shows that Stringer understands business language better than he understands business reality. But he does understand one important thing. The old way is expensive. Bodies bring police. Wars interrupt sales. Corners only matter if they make money. A dead soldier is not just a tragedy, it is also bad payroll management, which is a very Stringer Bell way to look at a human being. The first major step toward his Season 3 mindset comes when Stringer works with Proposition Joe. That deal matters because it proves Stringer is willing to think beyond the normal West Side logic. The Barksdale crew has territory, Joe has better product, and Stringer sees that both sides can profit if they stop treating every block like holy land. Avon would never naturally arrive at that conclusion. Avon understands partnerships when they serve his strength, but he is not emotionally built to surrender symbolic ground. Stringer is. For him, territory is becoming less sacred. It is a sales channel. If the product is good and the money keeps coming, the name on the corner matters less. That is why, before Bunny and Stringer ever intersect, Stringer is already halfway to Amsterdam in his own head. He does not want legalization, obviously. He wants a quieter illegal market. He wants something organized enough that nobody has to shoot up the city every time a package changes hands. His dream is not morality. His dream is efficiency. That matters because Bunny's plan is also not born out of some soft-hearted fantasy where drugs disappear and everybody joins a church choir. Bunny knows the drug war is fake. He has been a police long enough to know that clearing one corner only moves the trade to another one. His problem is that the game is destroying the neighborhoods he is supposed to protect, and the department only cares about the numbers. So his question becomes simple and dangerous. If the city is already tolerating drugs everywhere, what happens if you tolerate them somewhere specific? That is where the timeline starts to line up. At the beginning of Season 3, both men are trapped by systems that reward stupidity. Stringer is trapped inside Avon's organization, where peace looks like weakness and business sense has to share a room with street pride. Bunny is trapped inside the Baltimore Police Department, where everyone knows the drug war is unwinnable, but everyone has to keep pretending the next sweep, the next raid, the next stat meeting will solve it. They are on opposite sides of the law, but structurally they are in the same position. Both are middle managers trying to make a broken institution behave like a rational machine. The towers coming down is a huge part of this. The Barksdales lose the high Rieses, and the trade spills harder onto the corners. For Avon, this means the old fight has to continue. You need corners, you defend corners, you take corners, and if somebody like Marlowe refuses to respect your name, you remind him. For Stringer, the towers coming down create a business problem. The organization has to adjust to a new market, and more corner fighting means more police attention. For Bunny, the corners are the entire problem. The open-air market is sitting in front of people's houses, schools, shops, and churches. He is watching normal life get pushed aside by a war nobody in power seriously intends to win. So when did Stringer and Bunny start working together? My theory is that the practical partnership begins the moment Bunny's free zones become credible to the dealers, and Stringer realizes that the police are not running a trick. That is probably not the first day Amsterdam opens. At first, the street does not trust it. Of course they do not. Imagine being a dealer in Baltimore and a police major suddenly says, "Please sell your drugs in this abandoned area. We promise we will not arrest you." You would assume either the police are setting you up, you are being filmed, or somebody in City Hall has suffered a medical event. Bunny has to force the issue. His officers push dealers off the normal corners and into the free zones. They make it clear that dealing outside the zones brings arrests, while dealing inside the zones gets ignored as long as the violence stays down. That is the first contact between Bunny's plan and Stringer's world. It does not begin with Stringer. It begins with his people, and with every other crew's people, being moved around by the Western District. The street-level dealers become the messenger. They see the rules before the bosses fully understand them. That feels very much like The Wire. Institutions do not talk to each other directly at first. Information travels through bodies on the ground. A corner boy gets moved. A lieutenant hears about it. A package starts selling in a different place. Someone notices fewer arrests. Someone else notices the police are watching but not jumping in. Eventually, the people above the corner have to ask what is happening. That is probably when Stringer enters the situation mentally. He would not need Bunny to explain Amsterdam to him. Stringer would look at it and immediately understand the business value. The police have unintentionally created a controlled market. They have removed one of the biggest costs of doing business. As long as the dealers follow certain rules, no guns, no bodies, no selling on the regular corners. In Stringer's world, that is not madness. That is almost beautiful. It is zoning. It is risk management. It is the street becoming legible. The New Day co-op makes this even more important. Stringer's whole project with the co-op is to reduce unnecessary violence by getting the major players to share supply and stop bleeding each other over territory. The co-op is Stringer's version of reform. Again, not moral reform, market reform. He wants the drug trade to behave like a cartel meeting instead of a feud. Bunny's Amsterdam accidentally gives that idea physical space. The co-op can talk about peace all it wants, but as long as the product is being sold on disputed corners, the old problems remain. Amsterdam offers a place where the normal argument over corners becomes less important. That is why I do not think Stringer and Bunny start working together through a secret agreement. I think the show tells us piece by piece that Stringer begins cooperating once Amsterdam proves it is real. He does not have to like Bunny, trust Bunny, or even know Bunny personally. He only has to understand that Bunny's experiment serves his own strategy. The police want the corners quiet. Stringer wants the corners to stop causing wars. Those two goals overlap enough for cooperation to happen. The timeline that makes the most sense is this. First, Stringer moves toward business-first thinking during Avon's imprisonment and his arrangement with Prop Joe. Second, the towers come down, making territory more unstable and pushing the drug market back onto the open corners. Third, Bunny, under pressure from the department and close enough to retirement to take a dangerous swing, creates the free zones. Fourth, the street-level crews are forced into Amsterdam, resist it, test it, and slowly realize the police are serious. Fifth, word travels upward, and Stringer recognizes the free zones as the closest thing Baltimore has ever given him to a rational marketplace. Sixth, through the co-op and his own people, Stringer effectively allows the experiment to continue because it benefits him. That fifth step is the key. That is where I would place the real beginning of the Stringer-Bunny partnership. Not at the invention of Amsterdam, because Stringer did not invent it. Not at the earliest forced relocations, because the street still did not know what it was. The partnership begins once the dealers understand the rules and the bosses stop treating it as a police trap. That is the moment Bunny's fantasy becomes Stringer's opportunity. The show also makes the connection through contrast with Avon. Avon returning from prison ruins the clean logic Stringer is trying to build. Avon looks at Marlowe and sees disrespect. Stringer looks at Marlowe and sees a business problem that could be solved through negotiation, pressure, or absorption into the co-op. Avon cannot live with that. For Avon, the Barksdale name has to mean something on the street. If Marlowe is allowed to stand there and refuse him, the whole mythology of Avon Barksdale starts shrinking. Stringer is trying to leave that mythology behind, or at least put it under management. He wants power without the performance of power. Avon wants the performance because to him, that is part of the power itself. That conflict shows why Bunny and Stringer fit together for a brief second. Bunny is also tired of performance. He is tired of raids that do not change anything, press conferences that pretend something was achieved, and commanders acting like statistics are reality. Amsterdam is his attempt to stop performing police work and actually change the shape of the problem. Stringer is tired of performing street dominance when the money could be made more smoothly. He is trying to stop acting like a gangster in the old theatrical sense and start acting like an executive, even if the foundation is still blood and heroin. The tragedy is that both men are right about something and wrong about something bigger. Bunny is right that the old drug war is a lie. He proves that if the police stop chasing every corner and concentrate the trade, violence drops and neighborhoods breathe again. He is wrong because he thinks a practical result can survive inside a political system built on appearances. Once Amsterdam is exposed, nobody in power can admit the experiment worked, because admitting it worked means admitting the whole official strategy has been nonsense for decades. The city does not need Amsterdam to fail on the ground. It needs Amsterdam to be publicly unacceptable. Stinger is right that the drug trade is destroying itself through pointless violence. He is right that cooperation would make more money than war. He is right that Avon's obsession with corners keeps pulling the organization backward. But Stringer is wrong because he thinks he can turn a criminal empire into a clean business by borrowing the vocabulary of capitalism. He forgets that the drug trade is not just an illegal version of a supermarket chain. It runs on fear, reputation, loyalty, muscle, and the willingness to kill. You cannot remove those ingredients while still depending on them whenever negotiations fail. Stringer wants the benefits of the street and the respectability of the boardroom. He keeps trying to walk through both doors, and the building crushes him in the middle. That is also why Bunny and Stringer never become true allies in a dramatic, open way. A true alliance would require trust, and neither man has a world that allows it. Bunny cannot openly coordinate with a drug lord. Stringer cannot openly admit that his business plan depends on a police major's illegal experiment. Their connection has to remain silent because the second it becomes official, it becomes impossible. That is why the show lets the connection exist through consequences instead of declarations. The dealers move. The corners quiet down. The co-op benefits. Bunny's stats improve. Stringer's logic gains proof. Nobody has to say the partnership out loud because the city itself is saying it. There is also a darker way to read it. Bunny thinks he is creating a quarantine. Stringer sees a marketplace. Those are not the same idea. Bunny's version of Amsterdam is ugly, desperate, and partly humane. He wants to contain the damage so the rest of the district can function. Stringer's version is cleaner in his own mind, but morally colder. He sees the advantage. He sees that less police pressure and less violence can increase business. So even when Stringer and Bunny overlap, they are not reaching for the same kind of peace. Bunny wants public peace. Stringer wants profitable peace. The difference matters because one man is trying to reduce harm while the other is trying to stabilize harm. And yet, for a while, the same street arrangement gives both of them what they want. That is the uncomfortable brilliance of Season 3. The most effective policing strategy in the season helps the drug trade operate more efficiently. The most business-minded drug dealer in the season helps reduce the kind of violence the police claim to care about. The Wire does not let you keep the categories clean. Bunny is breaking the law to make the city safer. Stringer is making the drug trade more civilized so it can keep poisoning people with fewer interruptions. Both men are reformers, and neither reform is innocent. My final theory is this. Stringer and Bunny start working together. Sometime after Amsterdam has survived its first street-level test, probably mid-season, when the dealers understand the zones are real, and Stringer has enough information to fold them into his larger co-op logic. The show does not give us one handshake moment because the point is that systems cooperate before people admit they are cooperating. Bunny creates the space. Stringer recognizes the value of the space. The street does the communication between them. If you want the cleanest answer, I would say their partnership begins when Stringer stops viewing Amsterdam as police weirdness and starts treating it as a business condition. That is the turning point. Before that, Bunny is acting alone. After that, Stringer's organization is no longer just being pushed around by Bunny's experiment. It is benefiting from it, adjusting to it, and quietly helping it function by accepting the rules. My own feeling is that Stringer probably understood Bunny faster than almost anyone else on the street would have. He would not need a moral argument. He would not need the Bunny Colvin speech about corners and neighborhoods. He would hear that the police are allowing sales in certain dead zones and cracking down everywhere else, and his mind would go straight to the obvious place. Lower risk, less heat, fewer bodies, cleaner distribution. In another kind of city, Bunny and Stringer might have become open negotiators from opposite sides of a horrible reality. In Baltimore, that can only happen by accident, in whispers, through rumors, through corner boys being moved from one block to another. That is why their invisible partnership feels so important. It proves that The Wire is not only about good guys and bad guys failing each other. It is about people inside broken systems occasionally seeing the same truth from different sides and still being unable to save it. Bunny sees that the drug war cannot be won by pretending every corner sweep matters. Stringer sees that the drug economy cannot survive forever as a constant street war. For one brief moment, both men move toward the same answer. Take the corners out of the equation. The city cannot allow Bunny's version, and the street cannot allow Stringer's version. So the experiment dies, Stringer dies, and Baltimore goes back to pretending the old rules make sense. That is the most Wire answer possible. They started working together when neither of them could say they were working together. And by the time the pattern becomes clear, the pattern is already doomed.